Notice of this meeting was advertised in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Mr. Tompkins?
Here.
Ms. Jackson? Present. Ms. Trueblood? Present. Mr. Cartier?
Present.
Mr. Allen?
Present. Business for discussion and/or formal action as advertised. For the purpose of discussing the 2016 municipal budget as presented by the mayor, formal action may be taken. Good morning and welcome to the 2016 proposed budget meeting. I believe Mayor Patriarca and CFO Dave Bennick have a brief presentation. After that, we'll follow with council ideas, comments, and discussion about the budget.
Excuse me. Council President, we'll forego the presentation at this time. It's on the web page. It's our PowerPoint that is basically just identifying the changes between this year and last year's budget.
So we'll go to the budget review by council. Council, we've had the budget for a few weeks now. The proposed budget is $23,516.57. I'm sorry, $57.84. The 2015 final budget was $23,706,763.84. Is there any discussion or ideas?
I'd like to hear the mayor's proposed capital budget. If you would, please. The only planned purchases we have this year are we're hoping to come to council with a purchase for a backhoe machine. Our current backhoe machine is on its last leg. That and our sweeper both have seen their better days. As council recalls, to approve a sweeping contract so that we're going to be able to forego buying the sweeper, but the backhoe is an important element in our DPW operation. It allows us to maintain our status with the DEP requirements to maintain all our stormwater outfalls and our stormwater system. We use it to go out and either blow out our lines that are clogged in our stormwater system, or we use it to suck out the water in our seepage pits, which we have mostly in the town, because we don't have a complete stormwater system throughout the township. We've over the years just put these seepage pits in, which are basically a catch basin with a pipe that comes off of them, maybe a lateral each way, that is perforated and stone filled so that it percolates back into the ground, and that's how we maintain stormwater in most of the developments in our more rural areas. So, you know, that allows us to keep the sediment out of there, keep them cleaned, and then during, you know, real heavy storms, we actually go through and try and keep them. And when they're full to capacity and the roads are starting to flood, we'll go out and try and relieve some of that pressure off of those lines. But it is a very important tool, piece of equipment within our system, and we are getting prices, and they're running anywhere from a tow behind system of maybe $150,000 to a complete drive system, which is probably $250,000 $200,000. And then of course we would come to council with a proposed road program probably at the end of the year. I think currently what we have now authorized will get us through most of the year on road paving, but as you know, from recent paving operations, we like to stay ahead of that and be prepared and set up the next level of road paving at the end of the year, and then we're ready going forward into the new year. That's pretty much all we have at this time on capital projects.
I'll probably ask these questions later when you come back for authorization of the purchase, but how long have we had the existing backhoe?
The backhoe is, you know, off the top of my head, I don't know. I know it's been here a long time, longer than I've been in this position. It was here before that. We purchased it back when I was an employee here. It's over 10 years old.
And what's the life expectancy of those?
That I don't have off the top of my head. We will prepare that.
So you'll be ready for it when it comes.
When we come to you for a purchase, yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. President.
Question. In the budget message, you mentioned that this year, as in years past, we're experiencing revenue issues. Are we evaluating ways that we would potentially be able to bring in revenue in some of the future years?
Well, you're limited as to, you know, where revenue comes from. We can't like hold fundraisers. It's not a club, an organization that, you know, if we need money, we just, you know, hold a fundraiser or do things of that nature.
Right.
You know, we're limited to permitting fees, different state aids that come in, and basically the tax base. We utilize the taxpayers. It's basically a user fee in no less a term for what we provide in services. So the problem comes that most of our tax base comes from residential taxes, and if we could increase our commercial or industrial you know, use here in the township, then we could relieve some of the residential burden, the tax burden from the residential side of the equation, and that's what we've been continually trying to do, is market the town for business and commercial use, but we have had very little takers on that venture.
Okay. Under the Public Works tab, the Public Defender tab, we're requesting $6,000 more than last year. Last year we spent $6,000. Is there any reason why there's a $6,000 increase?
We routinely get reimbursed from the municipal court for that, so revenue comes in and it's offset back and forth. They fund a good part of it, but in 2015 we spent over $24,000. So we've had this money coming in, but I really didn't want to run short, and I don't want to put too much money into this trust fund. So I was squeaking by and not really being able to pay the bills at the end of December because I was running out of money because I only had $6,000 to add additional funding.
Okay.
So it's not that I'm going to spend this money, but I don't want to run short.
Right. Okay. Council, are there any other comments?
Quite a few.
Jack?
Mr. Mayor, you had mentioned the capital improvements I forget, $213,000 for the backhoe, is that what it was? Something like that?
It would depend on what we decided at the time we come to council for the purchase. They have a pull-behind system and a tow-behind that is a smaller system, and it may meet our needs. We're evaluating that. They've got a couple different companies they're looking at for that. And then there's the system like we use now, and other towns use, and I know the county actually, I think, just purchased a new one, and that's the drive system where you drive, and the system's all contained in one vehicle. So there's a large difference in price, and if the tow-behind unit will meet our needs and seems to be a reliable way to go and have the longevity that we're looking for, then we may opt, to come to council with that option.
An area of 64 square miles. It's a lot of area to cover.
It's a lot of area to cover, and we have a lot of, we have a routine system, and it may be on our webpage, I believe, but you can see the schedule, and when they go out routinely, it's done constantly. There's backhauls out, and because it's not like they can go out one day and hit all our stormwater systems. They have to go out, and then this report has to go to DEP to show them that we are maintaining our stormwater system. They want to know that we clean this out, and then we have to show where we get rid of the waste that we pull out of there.
Could this also be used to install new stormwater drainage?
No, it's basically just a large vacuum cleaner is what it is. It's a truck, it's like a wet dry vac, and it's basically a large vacuum cleaner that, they'll stick the hose down into the system, and if there's a clogged line and they can't, suck it out, they'll jet water through it and jet it out, that way. And it's also a unit that can be used, say with, and I don't think they have one, the MUA, if there's a clog in their pipes and they need to jet it out. They may have a tow.
They have something, because I've made a complaint on my line, and they made it out a few years ago.
But I know we've been asked by other towns, Pemberton Borough and so forth, at times to help them when their system wasn't working right, and we send our unit to help other towns. But that's basically all it is. It's a giant wet dry vac.
The other thing you had mentioned, the roads and asphalt and whatnot for that, where we have our capital improvement bond from last year for, I believe it was $1 million. And I'm sure you know my feeling on that. I'm not for borrowing money to maintain our roads. I think it should be included in our annual budget. If you were to put a guess on how much we're going to utilize this year on asphalt and what it would take, 200,000, 400,000.
I would estimate off the top of my head at least 400,000 at this point in asphalt. We're trying to do anywhere from 4 to 6 miles of road a year now, and this year we have some very large projects. Ridgeview Avenue is scheduled, Hunter Boulevard is scheduled, we're doing Bellevue, which is pretty long. Hunter is a very long, and Ridgeview is a very long road.
And I agree, the roads need to be done and maintained. And I know I came to Mr. Gonzalez a couple weeks ago. One of the residents reached out to me. They live on a dirt road that needs graded very regularly. And I'm looking at it thinking it might be cost effective just to pave the road versus grading it every 3 months.
That's possible, depending on where it's at. Paving is very difficult in the pine lands. There may be one council member that was here and remembers when we did the White Boggs Road, and that was dirt, and we did a portion of that, and just the hoops we had to jump through with pine lands to get a paved road in the pine lands on an undeveloped road. Is not to say we wouldn't look at that again.
But this is over in Browns Mills, over by the lake, and it's in a developed area, so.
It doesn't matter if it's developed, undeveloped. When you have an undeveloped road and you want to develop it, Pinelands has extra hoops for us, and we can look at that, obviously, like you say, if it's more cost effective to pave the road as opposed to constantly maintaining it the way we are, then sure, we would go that route.
But my big issue on this is we're looking at possibly, $600,000, $800,000 bond again this year, and then we'll be paying interest on it for the next 20 years or so. I would really like to have this as a budgeted item. I really would. Instead of borrowing every year, I believe it should be included in the annual budget.
I don't disagree with you. I'm not a big fan of borrowing if we don't have to, but you also have to look at the other side of that equation. To put $600,000 in the budget, you're looking at increasing the budget by 9 cents, roughly. Or probably about 7 cents. About 7 cents increase in the budget for that particular year. So if you bonded, you could maybe increase the debt payment of maybe a half a cent. And you have to look at, okay, what can the residents accept? Can they put out that extra $100, or can they put out an extra $6 a year for their? It's no different than when you buy a house or people go buy new cars, the large ticket items. You look at them and say, okay, what can I afford in my budget? Can I manage this? And you say, well, we're just increasing that debt for down the line for the next 20 years, but can I manage that payment for that time, or can I take a hit and put it all out there at once? And there's been times we have put projects when the budgets were easier in full budget mode. We'd put it in the budget and we'd do a building or whatever and pay for it cash, and it worked. But when you get into the larger ticket items, it gets challenging.
And you said one thing, this is a difficult budget process, and it's getting more and more difficult. By adding more and more debt to it, you're not making it any easiger.
But we're still spending down on our debt, though.
Right, we are still spending down on the debt, and the debt is holding pretty much stable. Our current debt is about $27,000.
It was
or
32.
$27 million. No, it's about $27 million.
And that includes the water and everything?
No, that's
our total debt, though.
Debt. The water holds its own, and our water is stable. Our water division is stable.
But the entire municipal debt is right around $32 million.
Well, you're including the water debt, the MUA debt, all these debts that.
But if they were to default, the taxpayers are still the ones online for paying this.
Well, if they were to default, then the revenue coming in from those divisions, they're revenue generating divisions. They're not tax divisions. They charge for the services they get. So the MUA sends a bill out, the water sends a bill out, and the residents pay for that debt in that water division or that MUA division. So it is, feasible to have, bills within that department that the user fee pays for. They pay for their debt, and they can increase their water if they want.
Well, we haven't
increased their MUA.
We haven't in many, many years.
And that's because we haven't had to, because we are so stable in that division.
And as you know, I'm a newly elected representative up here, but I have been sitting in the audience for a few years. And in the entire time I've been sitting here, I don't remember one time the MUA coming in here asking for a bond for anything within recent history.
And you haven't seen the MUA do any major infrastructure projects neither. That's been my concern with the MUA. Our MUA is not doing the infrastructure projects like our water division is. Our water division is doing major infrastructure projects, but you haven't seen them come also to the table.
I believe they just had a major repair on North Lakeshore within the last year or two, correct?
That's what they're doing. They're going out and repairing.
Right.
They're going out and repairing projects. Yeah, they're going out and repairing breaks that are happening because their system is failing.
Right.
But they're not doing major infrastructure projects such as replacing all these old lines so that they don't have the breaks, the preventive maintenance. We're going out in the water division and we're putting new mains in all throughout the town so that we don't have this problem going forward, and you don't see us coming to you for these major bond issues because we're doing it all in-house within the budget.
Well, we just did $1 million bond for well 11.
That's a.
And then we had
specific
bonds a year
system.
ago on well 11.
That's a specific system that needed a specific treatment facility. I'm talking about infrastructure such as mains. When we put mains in, valves in, those type of things are all the interconnection parts that we take care of in-house that have been working well within the water division. That's what I was referring to that I believe should be done in the MUA. All the connecting infrastructure, yeah, they may get a pump station go down, and that may be a major, issue for them. But it's all the other things that, like you say, you had a break on Lakehurst Road. You spend $100,000 because your system is, or if you were putting $100,000 worth of new pipe in, maybe you wouldn't have a break in that line. That's where I'm going with that. But the MUA and the water are self-liquidating. They bring money in and through their revenue in their payments, and they pay their bills, and they're able to do that within their budget. And what we focus on is what we have to charge the taxpayers for, and this is just for all our services in this workbook that you have here and in this budget, is the services that we're providing, and we have to generate revenue for that, and that revenue comes out of that tax levy, which I believe this year is about, what, 14 million? Yeah, it's about 14 million this year that we're charging the taxpayers for the services that we are providing. And the other things that they still are requiring us to provide for them, such as roads, are difficult to put in this budget because it increases that budget well above our 2% cap margin that we're allowed to go to. So we have to find ways to work within that, and then we bring in smaller debt payments that we can manage within the budget, and it doesn't impact. It's not the best way to go, and believe me, I hear from my wife constantly. We're borrowing more money this year. She would do well sitting next to you up there, Jack, because she would be right alongside you saying, yeah, I agree with him, we shouldn't be borrowing. But what I ask and what we ask is, show me another way. You show me how we can do it differently, and if the taxpayers can accept that, we're in. It's one thing to say do something different, but it's another thing to come and show me how. I'm not saying we know all the answers, but we do know that it's very difficult to.
Well, there are ways to tighten the shoot or the purse strings a little bit.
Well, if you're going to put one thing
$4,000
on one side of the
TVs
equation,
is a good example of that.
You put one thing on one side of the equation, you've got to be willing to take something off the other, and that's the sacrifice. And if you're willing to make that sacrifice, there's consequences to that. Something will go away.
Mm-hmm.
So like the bonding that we keep doing is, in retrospect, is keeping the township residents' taxes down.
It's keeping the taxes
Temporarily.
manageable. Well, it's manageable because we're able to make that debt payment. We're able to make that monthly payment, or actually in this case it's annual payments. Yeah, and we can level that out to affordable payments, as opposed to spiking the budget and saying, okay, we need $600,000 this year for capital projects, and we're going to put it in the budget. All right, next year we need $600,000. The budget's still going to be high. We're still going to be charging that $600,000. Now those residents are up at that higher level of budgeting, as opposed to staying low and gradually bringing themselves up each year. Because remember, other things in the budget are going up each year that are contractual issues that continue to rise in the budget. So those things are still going up also. So if you spike the budget, you're not going to be able to say, oh, well, next year we won't have to do the $600,000.
But if you keep borrowing $1 million a year for the roads project, just as an example, and you keep putting that into the debt, when do you stop adding debt? What is our level? You said your number was 27,000 or 27 million. Mine was 32. Where do you stop it and say, okay, maybe it's time not to be borrowing anymore? Do you borrow up to $50 million, or do you continue until you're at $75 million?
But that doesn't. With what's in the budget doesn't mean that we're actually going to spend $1 million.
But we're gonna,
The 50, if I'm correct, the $50,000 that they are requesting allows us to the ability to, if we needed the $1 million to use. Correct?
Correct. And
So
council
we're not putting $1 million in the budget to borrow.
Right, council decides, at the end of the day, administration would come to council with for authorization to spend, or to borrow anything, and then if we came to you with $1 million, and you didn't like $1 million, said, no, we're not doing it, you don't vote for $1 million.
I'm going to make my colleagues mad, but I'm going to tell you right now, there's not one bond issue that you're going to present to this council that they will not approve.
I disagree with that. They've not approved everything. We've had discussions, and we've had changes in different things, but for the most part, we try to present responsible issues to council so that we don't have that discussion, that we don't have to argue about what's right, what's wrong, what should be, what we want, what council wants. We look at what the residents want, and if it's reasonable, council generally will accept that, because that's what the residents are looking for. But, it's not that we're looking, and you keep going to the, you borrow, but you also got to remember, we're also paying. We're paying down that. So if you look at, and maybe I should put the PowerPoint on, you can see the graphs, and it is, like I say, it is on our webpage to show where our debt is and where it has been and how it is stable. And our debt ratio is quite low. It's under 2%, 1.8%, our debt ratio, which is total valuation of all the property in the township compared to our debt. And that's a pretty low debt ratio. It's one of the lower debt ratios that the town has seen in 40 years.
And then we had to do the bridges.
Right, and this includes our $6 million we just did for our bridges. And we're still down in an area that's manageable. I don't want to say it's low, because it's not. It's where we've been since I've been mayor, but it hasn't spiked and taken off. We haven't increased the debt to any large amount, but when you look back and see all that we're doing, all the projects we've done, the 5 dams, the parks, all the different projects, the roads, and you say, well, you've done a lot of capital projects, and our debt is holding stable. And I look at that as an accomplishment on this council and the administration, that we've been able to do these type of projects for the community and not just overloaded us with debt. Yeah, we're having difficult bringing that debt down. I'd love to see it down to 0, but is that realistic? I don't think any of us here will ever see that, unless we just decide to stop everything and let the town just start deteriorating and
I'm not suggesting that,
wait for
okay?
the tumbleweeds to come.
No, I'm not suggesting that.
I know you're not. But that's
well, some
the
folks
realistic way.
sometimes misinterpret things, so I want to
until the
stop that.
tumbleweeds go rolling down the street, and somebody says, "Hey, we got to do something." That's
and there is the roads under capital improvements and a couple other things. And one thing that I'm glad you kept talking, because it made it pop into my mind to remind me. I can foresee another $1 million bond for PL Fire Department coming up this year.
No, we're looking at prices. We're getting ready to put that out to bid to see what the bid specs are being worked on, so we can see what that's going to be. But we've got some prices already just on a building, and that's less than 10% of what you're proposing, just for the structure, and then of course we may have to do another 10% to do the rest of it. But we have to see what the bids come in for that.
Didn't Country Lakes Fire cost over $1 million for that facility?
It may have. I don't know. I doubt it. But I don't know.
I think on the GIFT it's listed as over $1 million.
Well, that's the value of the property. That doesn't mean that's what they paid for it.
Okay.
It's been there a while. But yeah, we're looking at a much more reasonable approach at
because I know I live in a small house. You see my house; it's minuscule, and I'm paying taxes on $94,000. So I can't.
That's subject to change.
Very soon. I might have to move out of town because I won't be able to afford to live here.
You have to move out of state if you got to move out of town.
Yeah, but I'm looking at the value of my home, and then you're saying you can put up a building for 100 grand. I might want you to start building a building in my backyard so I can have a new home if you can do it that cheap.
Well, depends on the approach that we go. Like I say, there's going to be other costs to that, but it's not going to be near $1 million building, by no means, and we're going to be able to do it much cheaper based on just the shell price that I got for a building so far. I think we're going to be, it's going to be probably cheaper than what it would cost to put the roof on, that we got the price on the roof, which was close to $250,000.
How many vendors did you go through for that?
Our engineers just got and it wasn't a quote, it was just an estimate from the engineering. So yeah, you could maybe take 20-30% off on an estimate from that if you bid it. And
I'm surprised we didn't go through a couple roofing companies and get free bids on that, or free estimates.
Well, once we saw what the sticker shock was on the just for the roof, and knowing what we have in the rest of the building, how the rest of that building is constructed, it was really a no-brainer to say, let's look at another option so that we have something that will have longevity going forward, because that building there is just a hodgepodge of buildings that they built and attached, and we really don't know how they built that. You can tell by looking at it.
We could probably talk all morning on this one. Let me move on to my next of about 100 questions. Sheet number 15. On current fund appropriations, general appropriations.
A, B, C, or D, Jack?
A. Well, it's page 15, so I got questions on
Oh,
page
it's page, go ahead.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I'm looking here at the police salaries, and we're taking a drop in the police salaries, and it looks like we're losing a lot of folks through attrition, retirements, moving to new jobs, and whatnot. My concern is if we're losing $250,000 off the budget this year, what's going to happen when we start refilling those vacant slots? Isn't that going to go back up over a time?
Salaries would increase. If we brought in more officers, the salaries would increase.
Right, so this number would increase as well, correct?
It's going to increase with the salaries.
Right.
Salary.
Okay. What I'm trying to get to, Ken, is it's kind of looking, it goes back to like the capital improvements. We're looking at a budget of X dollars now. When we start hiring more officers to fill these vacancies, it's going to be harder to budget and manage this document because it's going to cost us a lot more.
But we don't know if we're going to get new officers in that year.
For the vacant officers is in there.
Is it?
Yes.
Well,
it's just less because you're looking at retired officers who are at the top of their range and bringing in a rookie who's going to be at the bottom of the range.
Okay.
Yeah, there is money in that will cover, potentially cover some new officers if we can get to that point and hire, if the process allows us. And I just also had that discussion with state senator on civil service and trying to help us find ways to relieve some of that pressure. But the 4 officers that you see in the budget workbook that are in there are not at full salary because we know we're not going to get officers before a certain period throughout the year, so we wouldn't budget the full salaries for those four officers because that's just going to put money in the budget that we know we're not going to spend, and that's not the way we present the budget. And yes, as time goes on, say nobody retired and nobody left, and we brought those 4 officers on, and it went on for 5 years. Over that 5-year period, you're absolutely going to increase the budget substantially because their salaries are going to reach the top of their range in 5 years, and now you have to budget that.
But it would also be dependent upon overtime, whether overtime went up or down.
Well, overtime will be a
There's
factor.
a lot of factors, Jason.
Yeah.
It all becomes a factor, whether there's overtime involved, whether, the officers don't retire and we have a full load of officers at the top of the range, if they are involved in canines or EMTs or what shifts they're on, because all those things, elements are factors that, have to be considered in what affects the budget.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, that even though it may increase because of salaries if we brought in more additional officers, it might not increase as much because overtime might not be.
Well, it could reduce overtime if
Exactly.
you have more officers, but I don't know that I'd attribute the overtime. I personally don't see
I
the
don't think that would
overtime
be
issue.
substantial.
The overtime?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably not, but you brought up
Yeah.
the $4,000 TV, and
Yeah.
and that's
You gotta pay for the TV, right?
The overtime is an issue that I have because I don't think it's because of the manpower. I just think there seems to be more officers calling out sick now that they're on a different shift, and I don't understand that because I don't know if they're just sick of the shift or what, because there's a lot more sick time being used now than there was before, and, you know.
I know there's a lot of factors that could be attributed to that, but it's all guessing. The next item on that page I was going to ask about is emergency management services. Wages and salaries look like it went up 19%. I want a 19% pay raise. I don't think I've ever had one in my life.
Well, we did look at that position, and it was not that difficult to decide on increasing that individual's compensation because we know, working with him firsthand, what he does on an annual basis in that position. That individual, when you're home sleeping or worrying about what's happening during any particular situation, a storm of any sort, I know where he's at, and he's here before anyone. He's here after everyone's gone, and he's constantly updating me on what's going on, but he's here an awful lot in that position for a small compensation. So, you know, and the importance of what he does, we did not feel that to be unreasonable in that.
Well, in an earlier statement, you said, where are you going to make some cuts? You know, I'm just showing you some possibilities. Also, the next thing
Sounds
on...
like a lot, Jack. You say 19%, but when you look at the numbers, it's not a
19% is 19%. And I've never, I've been around, I've never had a 19% pay raise. Well, maybe I have, but I don't recall. That's a big pay raise.
in percentage.
We don't look at it as a pay to
Usually
this individual. It is compensation, and we look at it as compensation for services provided, and we know what this individual provides. And do I think this individual probably deserves more? Yeah, I know what the county gets and what they have over there on employees and individuals getting $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 in their emergency management department to work crisis situations, and
How
I
much
don't
they
know
get,
that.
Mayor? How much do they get compared
Like I say,
to our
no, they're
$1,000
full-time
guy?
employees getting $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, but I don't know that there's anyone over there that's more qualified than what we have right here. We have one of the most qualified emergency management coordinators, I believe. I know in Burlington County, and I would put him up against anyone in the state. For,
At 6,000.
Yeah. I'm comfortable with that, but obviously it's a council decision, you know, what you want to put in the budget there.
The other thing, I see the fire department. I know, like I said, I've sit in here as a resident, and I know we used to have EMS squad buildings and fire departments throughout the township. One of the first ones that got closed was Magnolia Road Fire, that's just up the road from my house. And one of the motivating factors for that closure was membership, and that was a motivating factor on a lot of these facilities. The other one was cost savings. It makes sense. If you have 5 facilities and you're paying 5 facilities, it would cost more than 1 or 2. But I see a 46% increase in expenditures for our fire department for this year.
Well, the cost efficiency is certainly something we consider within the fire department at all times, but none of the closures of any of our volunteer fire services was a cost savings measure. The driving decisions on any of these companies, they were companies at that time, was the lack of response and lack of membership. And we could not see we could not see the logic behind funding an organization that was not providing the service. And that's what the driving force was behind all of the services that were no longer supported. The closure of the service came as a result of the companies themselves, because they were no longer obviously getting the support from the township, and they couldn't obviously support themselves. And since they weren't providing the service, there was no need for them to go any further, so they chose to close their companies. The increase, the large increase that you're seeing in this particular line is due to the recent purchase that
What I
council
thought.
approved, and that was for the air bottles that we
$68,000.
Yeah, about $68,000 that we purchased. So that is where that increase came from.
Which we had to purchase.
Which is, yes, and which is in the budget as a budgeted item, which I know you like, Jack.
And
Just trying to be thorough.
well,
I can appreciate that.
didn't, if I remember correctly, what we budgeted for last year, throughout the year, didn't we end up spending $500,000 less?
Whole
Last
budget's
year?
only $199, so.
I thought I read that in the budget. Like, what we budgeted for throughout the year, we ended up spending
Total
$500,000.
budget,
The entire budget.
I don't know, Bob, do you have any idea what our total surplus was out of the budget later? What we did not spend?
That's where you're gonna use my Ferrari, right?
Yeah, let me see.
Get the picture taken off.
Blue.
Yeah, in your budget message, I knew I...
Yeah, roughly 600,000, 600,000 of what, was totally budgeted.
Right.
In our plan, our budget plan didn't occur because of, different things. And most of it comes from salary. Most of it comes from employees that retired early throughout the year that we can't anticipate unless we have a resignation from them. And you'll see that in the budget this year, where some officers are only budgeted so much because we knew they were retiring when we put the budget together. But you get that throughout the year. And then the workman's comp, when you get all these officers and employees, and it's mostly officers throughout the year that go out on workman's comp, that money now stays in the salary line, and the majority of that, their pay, gets paid through the workman's comp insurance. So that money stays in the salary and becomes surplus at the end of the year. And that's how we end up with that large. But you can't budget and hedge that and say, well, you know what, we're going to have $500,000 in potential, and
Right.
we won't budget that and hope that it happens, because when it doesn't happen, somebody's not getting paid. And I won't be here for that meeting when all those employees are here seeing council.
But also,
getting paid.
but also, can't that be attributed to just the department heads doing their job and being fiscally responsible and paying attention to things throughout the year?
Certainly has an impact on the budget, so that it doesn't exceed our plan. But the plan that we present is presented by the department heads to us, and we tweak it to where we think it could go, because although I've got them conditioned to where they know that what they can submit on their budget plan throughout the year now, as opposed to the way it used to be done, where it was a big wish list, they throw it all at us and hope that, we missed something and only cut so much. They're very responsible now when they submit that. They know that, contractual salaries can only be this, so we take care of that. The salary lines through administration and the finance office, we put all that in the budget. We don't even put that burden on them. We tell them, give us your operating. Tell us what you need to operate within your budget. And, they'll ask for manpower sometimes, and if we can give them a person, we do. But they give us the operating, and we look at the operating as opposed to the year before. And sometimes we'll see where, all right, you didn't spend anything in that line last year in that sub account. Why do you need it again this year? Well, the plan they just didn't get to it, but they still want to do something. So we may give them another bite at that apple and say, all right, we'll put it back in there this year. We'll let you, try and get this done this year and see how it goes. But some of the things they put in, like parts lines, maybe things didn't break as much as they could have, and we did better. So then that money stays in as surplus, and we are able to use that surplus the following year to help reduce the tax levy. So we're not charging as much. We can use surplus as opposed to charging tax payers. It's kind of how it works.
The next question, and again, I might have some questions that are just kind of out there because this is my first time
I was going to say,
experiencing
you're
this.
learning, Jack.
The next question I have would probably be better for the CFO. It's on sheet 26. And it's just one that I didn't really understand, and I thought maybe you could help me in
50,000?
26.
The 50,000?
Yeah, on the capital improvement fund. Is that a dedicated fund like the SALT fund or something like that, or is this a
Yes,
fund?
it is. It's used for down payments on bond ordinances. You're required to put 5% down. So
when we borrow the $1 million for
this will
improvements later on, it's there so we can loan.
If we borrow the $1 million.
Okay.
Either way, it'll go into the reserve and it'll sit there until you use it.
Okay. See, well, I told you it was an easy question, right? Thank you. Next question is on sheet 40B. 40B. Bravo.
And just so we're clear, Jack, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, if we wanted to make a capital purchase of $40,000, we could pay for it cash out of that $50,000 and not have to buy. If we had no other bond issue, hypothetically, we had no bond issues for the year,
Right.
we had a small capital purchase, we could charge the capital.
You'd have to do an ordinance for that.
Right, we'd have to do an ordinance,
But we wouldn't have
but
to
we
take
would
a
be able
bond.
to pay for it cash as opposed to funding it in another way.
And I understand anything go
Right.
over the spending cap of what, 20, what is it? 2,700?
20.
What requires an ordinance for spending?
Any capital
Any?
purchase,
Any capital? Okay.
yeah.
Not a specific.
Purchases,
But, and I understand if you want to buy a cop car for 40 grand,
Just fine.
you put it in. Well, no,
Without taking a bond.
we don't need an ordinance for
Right.
that.
Right.
If it's budgeted, which we have budgeted items for police cars, we don't have to do that. We just buy that off the state contract. And if
Okay.
it wasn't on the state contract, then we would have to put that out to bid because it's over the 17.5 threshold.
okay. Like I said, the next page is 40B. And earlier you'd mentioned the basin cleaner for $175,000. Well, 200 ballpark. But you also have here a 15-foot conveyor track paver for about the same amount. And I guess we're buying a couple more trucks for $64,000 with plows.
These aren't things that we're purchasing. They are things that we could come to council with and request to purchase, but that doesn't mean that we would purchase these things.
And they don't equal $1 million.
No, $500,000.
Right, so that's why I don't understand why you keep saying we're going to spend $1 million.
That just seems to be my yardstick.
Good number.
It sounds good to the public, when you present it that way, but it's not $1 million.
No, the 50,000 only gives us the ability to borrow
Up to.
$1 million. Our intentions are not, as the budget indicates, is not to come to council with $1 million, but purchase. But if something happens throughout the year and we want to be prepared for that, we are prepared to do that. But that's not our intent at this time.
I had a question there and I can't remember what it was. Sorry about that.
Council, while Jack is looking for his other questions, does anyone else have anything?
No, I have the same question about the 50,000, and that was explained with the 5% now, so that was mine. And also, under the police department, I was, I'm sorry, somehow last year I just glazed through it where the night differential, it's different from second shift, third shift, and also when you're an EMT, it's also
The stipend?
stipend, so I totally didn't see that last year, which I must have not really looked. I did look at it, but it just came to awareness for me that all the different differentials and different stipends and that go into it as well.
Yeah, they're contractual items that we're required to pay the employees, and we're working on ideas on how to curtail that a little bit, because it's kind of misleading when you look at a stipend that may be $600, and that's what the contract says. We're going to give you $600 for being, I believe, maybe EMT. I'm not sure. And under the Fair Labor Standard Act, we're required to take that stipend and quantify that into a hourly rate. So we take that and divide it into the 2,080 hours, and we come up with an hourly rate for that. Well, that hourly rate gets applied to their salary now, and it's now assigned to any hour they work, including overtime. So what may be in the contract is a $600 benefit, by the end of the year, by the time this employee gets done working, could be a $900 benefit, because they've made extra money. And I've got a couple ideas on how to maybe either make that fair to the contract, because to the residents, because we contract this and they agree to it for a certain dollar amount, but we end up paying more, or we just clean it up another way in the contract, so it's not as a stipend, and we find another way so it's not misleading, so it's more open at the end of the year.
Dave, we get a lot of residents come up talking about the vacant properties, and on page 4A, we see a huge anticipated revenue. What are we going to do to start bringing in that revenue with these vacant properties?
Well, we do bring that in. This year we brought in, I want to say it's about 512,000, somewhere in that area. And it's probably going to be more next year, because the price goes up each year on the abandoned homes. And it's unfortunate, but we're getting, we like that number coming into the budget, but it's not something I'd rather see zero on that line and have the houses occupied, and being productive, homes and residents and families within the community. But the fact that these homes aren't that way, and that this council or administration has very little control over making these homes family homes, because there's nothing we can really do that hasn't been thought of by every other council in probably the state in the country, to try and curb this problem that doesn't work, because we don't have the authority. We can't make a property owner or a responsible person like a bank do something with this home that is not authorized by law. What is authorized by law, and the legislators are trying to give us some tools, is to put pressure on these homeowners to do something with these properties, to get them back on the market, so families that are looking for homes can buy these homes and get them back on the in use, and that is to charge a vacant property registration fee. And it's quite common now throughout New Jersey. You're seeing more and more towns do this, if not most towns, and that fee structure, I think we start off at $500 for the first year. It might go to $1,000 or $1,500 after that, but it ends up somewhere around $3,000, I believe, at the top end of that, $3,000 or $5,000, and like these banks are paying it because, well, I don't know why. It doesn't make sense to me, but they're paying these fees, and that's where this money's coming from. And we have the program in effect. We don't see in the near future these homes all coming off. And at some point they're going to, that when something finally changes in this country and all these banks get rid of these homes, they're going to go back on the market. So that number is going to dwindle and potentially go to zero, hopefully go to zero. And yeah, that could create a problem in the budget somewhere down the line, because you won't have that revenue coming in anymore. So now you're down $500,000 Although we don't see that happening in the near future, I hope that it happens sometime in the future, only to better not only the community but the country, because it's a growing problem. But that's where that money comes from. It comes from our program that our Director of Community Development has established and council approved, and he manages. So, more than likely, we're anticipating it. More than likely, we'll see that fund again.
Have we kept a database of the registered homes?
We
since the
do.
beginning?
We
Can
have
we get
a
a report on that.
We
year?
can certainly provide a report. We have a complete database of all the registered homes at this point, and we're continuously trying to find more so that everyone, is treated fairly. So that if there's a vacant home out there, you should get notice that you have to be registered. But there's just so many, and it's not a job that one person does all the time, but our code enforcement tries to identify these homes throughout their travels and bring it back to.
Yeah, my curiosity is to see what was on at the beginning and see if what's fallen off of the list or coming back on, that sort of thing, on and off, or if it's been there since the program started. Yeah.
Right, and that's a good point, and we will certainly look at that, because I never looked at what we had at the beginning as opposed to what we have now, and are ones reoccurring, going off, coming back, or are one have to show how many dropped off also that may now be occupied, which is could give us some benchmarks as to how the system's working. But I hope to come to council in the near future to, and I don't know where this is going to go, but hopefully not viral, but I personally believe that we should also be looking at commercial properties. I think that a commercial property that sits vacant forever, there should be incentives for that owner who in most cases doesn't live in our township but has a building, a commercial property that is vacant, and we should encourage them, give incentives for that property owner to, if necessary, reduce possible rates so that that building might get occupied by a potential business person that wants to open a small business but doesn't want to pay the $15, $20 a square foot price that may be asked for, and may be able to get that business owner to reduce that cost so that but there's no reason why just because you have a business that you close down that sits for 10 years that you shouldn't be paying, when a homeowner who may even be a resident in another home in the town that has to pay a vacant property registration fee, and they're a resident and they're being given incentives to do something with their property, but a potential non-resident is not. And the argument of, oh well, that's going to hurt the business, we can't hurt our commercial business people. Well, it's not, because there's nobody in it. It's not hurting the business. If there's a business, if the place has a business in it, then there's no registration fee. It's only unoccupied buildings that tend to create blight and.
But I got a feeling. I understand what you're saying, Dave. But I got a feeling with something like, and I'm just going off the top of my head. And I'm going to name a business or two. So forgive me. Like the new Acme over there. I think last time I was over there, there was 3 empty storefronts. And if you start charging the owner of that facility, they're just going to pass that off onto the other
valid point, and we've been discussing
facility.
that as to how to structure it because of situations like that development, so that there can be a time period to give that business the opportunity to market that property and get somebody in there, but where we draw that line and finally say, what, your business has been empty for a year, it's been empty for 2 years, you know what, it's been empty for 20 years, you got to do something. And this could be that incentive mechanism that we have that helps us get that business. But yeah, you're absolutely right. we don't want, okay, this place moved out and, they're marketing it, trying to get somebody in, and, 3 months down the line, 6 months, 5 or 6 months down the line, we're hitting them with a fee that they're going to pass on to the other tenants.
To be honest, my thought is, I understand what you're saying, but I think our focus should be more on looking at some of these empty buildings and trying to bring the businesses in and utilizing some of these